Hello and welcome. Today, we begin our whispered journey into the heart of one of the most powerful and influential empires of the ancient world, Babylon. Located between the fertile banks of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, Babylon was more than just a city. It was a symbol of human achievement, wealth, and grandeur. Known for its towering ziggurats, the fabled hanging gardens, and the mighty rulers like Hammurabi and Nebuchadnezzar II, Babylon shaped the course of history and left behind a legacy that still fascinates us to this day. In this series, we will explore the rise and fall of Babylon, from its early beginnings to its golden age, and the mysteries surrounding its decline. Let's uncover the secrets of this forgotten empire, where ancient laws were written and legendary kings once walked. The First Babylonian Empire, Hammurabi's Code and Legal Legacy. In the annals of ancient history, few rulers have left as lasting an impact as Hammurabi, the sixth king of Babylon, who reigned from 1792 to 1750 BCE. His time on the throne not only marked the emergence of Babylon as a major power in Mesopotamia, but also gave birth to one of the most significant legal documents in human history, Hammurabi's Code. This code, inscribed on a towering black stone stele, became a foundation of justice, symbolizing both the height of Babylonian civilization and the dawn of a new era of legal governance. Hammurabi inherited a relatively modest kingdom centered around the city of Babylon. However, through a series of military campaigns, alliances, and shrewd diplomacy, he expanded Babylon's influence across the region, defeating rival city-states such as Larsa, Eshnunna, and Mari, and eventually absorbing the kingdom of Assyria. By the time of his death, Babylon had become the dominant power in southern Mesopotamia, stretching across much of the Tigris and Euphrates river valleys. Yet, Hammurabi's greatest contribution was not merely territorial conquest, but the creation of a unified legal system that would govern his vast and diverse empire. In an era where tribal customs and local laws dominated, Hammurabi sought to bring order through a centralized set of rules that would apply to all his subjects, regardless of their status or origins. This vision culminated in the creation of Hammurabi's Code, a detailed legal text that addressed everything from criminal justice to family law, trade, and economic regulations. The stele bearing Hammurabi's Code, discovered by archaeologists in 1901 at Susa, in present-day Iran, is a striking artifact. Standing over 7 feet tall, it is inscribed with 282 laws written in Akkadian, the language of diplomacy and governance in ancient Mesopotamia. At the top of the stele, a relief shows Hammurabi standing before the sun god Shamash, the deity associated with justice. In this depiction, Shamash hands Hammurabi the symbols of kingship and law, a powerful visual representation of divine authority. This image reinforces the belief that Hammurabi's laws were divinely sanctioned, imbuing them with a sense of sacred legitimacy. Hammurabi's Code was revolutionary not just because it codified laws, but because it established the principle that justice was a central duty of the king. Unlike earlier legal codes, which were often collections of customary laws, Hammurabi's Code was comprehensive and forward-thinking. It covered various aspects of daily life, including trade and commerce, laws governing contracts, loans, and debts. For example, if a man was unable to repay a loan, he could offer labor as compensation for a limited period, typically no longer than 3 years. Property rights, detailed rules concerning land ownership, property disputes, and theft. If someone's property was damaged or stolen, the code laid out specific compensations. Family law, issues of marriage, divorce, and inheritance. Marriages were legally binding contracts, and the code provided protection for women, ensuring that they received compensation in cases of wrongful abandonment or abuse. Punishments for crime. The most famous aspect of Hammurabi's code is its principle of an eye for an eye, a system of retributive justice. The punishments were often proportional to the social status of the individuals involved. For example, harming a nobleman carried a harsher penalty than harming a commoner. One of the most remarkable aspects of Hammurabi's code was its commitment to protecting the weak and vulnerable in society. Several laws were designed to defend the rights of widows, orphans, and slaves, ensuring that they were not exploited or mistreated. The code also established fixed wages for laborers, standardizing economic relations in a way that promoted fairness and stability across the kingdom. While some of the punishments in Hammurabi's code may seem harsh by modern standards, such as death for theft or severe mutilation for other crimes, the principles behind the laws reflected a desire for order and justice in a rapidly expanding and diverse empire. At its core, the code represented a significant step toward the rule of law, replacing arbitrary rule with a clear legal framework that everyone, from the poorest farmer to the wealthiest noble, was expected to follow. Hammurabi's code also provided for the resolution of disputes through trial by judge, a precursor to modern judicial systems. While the code allowed for the presentation of witnesses and evidence, the penalties were often harsh, and guilt could be determined based on public accusations or even divine judgment, such as through trial by ordeal, where the outcome of a dangerous task was believed to reflect the god's will. After Hammurabi's death, his empire did not last long, and within a century, Babylon fell into decline. However, his legal legacy lived on. Hammurabi's code became a model for later Mesopotamian rulers and influenced legal systems in the region for centuries. The Assyrians, the Hittites, and even the Persians took inspiration from Hammurabi's laws when establishing their own legal frameworks. In the broader context of world history, Hammurabi's code stands as one of the earliest examples of written law, paving the way for subsequent legal traditions that would shape civilizations across the globe. Today, Hammurabi's stele stands in the Louvre Museum in Paris, a silent testament to the innovation and wisdom of a king who understood that the rule of law was the key to maintaining peace and stability in a complex society. His vision for justice, balancing the need for order with the rights of the vulnerable, continues to resonate with us today, reminding us that the foundations of modern legal systems were laid thousands of years ago in the fertile valleys of ancient Babylon. The Tower of Babel, fact or myth? One of the most enduring and mysterious stories from the ancient world is that of the Tower of Babel. The tale, found in the book of Genesis in the Bible, describes a massive tower built by the people of the earth in their attempt to reach the heavens. According to the story, humanity, united by a single language, sought to make a name for themselves by constructing a tower so tall that it would reach into the sky. However, their ambitions were thwarted by God, who confused their language and scattered them across the earth, halting their construction and ensuring they would no longer understand one another. This dramatic story of ambition, confusion, and divine intervention has captivated minds for millennia, but it raises an intriguing question: was there ever a real Tower of Babel, or is it purely a myth? The story of the Tower of Babel comes from a period when Babylon was one of the most prominent cities in Mesopotamia. Ancient Babylonian architecture was known for its impressive ziggurats, massive stepped pyramids that served as religious temples. Some scholars believe that the story of the Tower of Babel could have been inspired by one of these real-life ziggurats, specifically the Etemenanke, a massive ziggurat dedicated to the god Marduk that stood in the heart of Babylon. The Etemenanke was said to be a towering structure, standing over 91 meters, 300 feet, tall. Built around the 6th century BCE, it was one of the largest and most impressive buildings in the ancient world. The ziggurat was a symbol of Babylon's religious devotion and its architectural grandeur, reaching toward the heavens in honor of the gods. It is possible that later generations, looking back on the monumental structures of Babylon, wove stories around these temples, giving rise to the biblical tale of the Tower of Babel. The Tower of Babel story also carries a deeper meaning, reflecting the ancient human desire to build and achieve great things, as well as the limitations of human ambition. In many ways, it is a cautionary tale about the dangers of pride and overreach, warning against the hubris of trying to rival the gods. In the biblical account, God's decision to scatter humanity and confuse their languages was a punishment for their arrogance, a way of ensuring that no single human endeavor would grow too powerful or ambitious. But what evidence do we have of the actual existence of the Tower of Babel, or the Etemenanke that may have inspired it? Unfortunately, very little remains of the original ziggurat of Etemenanke. Archaeological excavations have uncovered the base of the structure, but much of the original tower was lost over the centuries, either due to natural disasters, invasions, or the passage of time. The ruins that remain give us an idea of its scale, but the full grandeur of the tower can only be imagined through the accounts left behind by ancient writers and historians. The Greek historian Herodotus, writing in the 5th century BCE, described a massive tower in Babylon that could have been the Etemenanke. He noted that it consisted of 7 tiers, each smaller than the one below, and that it was topped with a temple dedicated to the Babylonian gods. Although Herodotus' descriptions are not always reliable, his account suggests that the Tower of Babel may have been based on a real structure that once dominated the skyline of Babylon. Additionally, inscriptions from Nebuchadnezzar II, one of Babylon's greatest kings, refer to the rebuilding and restoration of the ziggurat during his reign in the 6th century BCE. Nebuchadnezzar took great pride in Babylon's architectural achievements, and the Etemenanke was a central feature of his efforts to elevate the city's status as the religious and cultural heart of Mesopotamia. His inscriptions suggest that the tower was seen as a symbol of Babylon's power and devotion to the gods. While the Etemenanke may provide a historical basis for the story of the Tower of Babel, the tale itself is rooted in myth and religious allegory. The Babylonian tradition of constructing ziggurats, which were designed to connect heaven and earth, may have contributed to the idea of a tower reaching into the sky. However, the biblical story focuses more on the moral lesson of humanity's hubris rather than the actual architecture of the tower. The significance of language in the story of the Tower of Babel is another fascinating aspect. According to the Bible, before the tower's construction, all humans spoke a single language, allowing them to work together easily. God's decision to confuse their language and scatter them across the world is a symbolic explanation for the diversity of languages and cultures that we see today. The concept of a unified human language is an ancient idea that resonates across different cultures, and the Tower of Babel story serves as an origin myth for how languages came to be fragmented. While the historical evidence for a physical Tower of Babel is scarce, the story's symbolic power remains strong. The image of a towering structure, designed to pierce the heavens, only to be struck down by divine will, speaks to the human experience of ambition, creativity, and the limits of our reach. In this sense, the Tower of Babel represents both the heights of human potential and the dangers of unchecked pride. The legacy of the Tower of Babel endures in our culture today, not just as a biblical story, but as a symbol in art, literature, and even language itself. The term Babel has come to signify confusion and disarray, particularly in the context of language and communication. The idea that a single project could unite humanity, only to fall apart due to miscommunication, remains a powerful metaphor for the challenges of cooperation and the limitations of human unity. The Hanging Gardens of Babylon, Wonders of the Ancient World. Among the 7 wonders of the ancient world, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon stand out as one of the most mysterious and captivating. While the Great Pyramid of Giza or the statue of Zeus at Olympia were well documented by ancient writers, the Hanging Gardens remain shrouded in uncertainty. Were they a real structure, or merely the product of ancient myth and imagination? If they did exist, how were these lush, towering gardens sustained in the arid environment of Mesopotamia? Let's journey into the legend of the Hanging Gardens and explore the mystery of one of history's most enduring architectural wonders. The Hanging Gardens were said to have been located in the heart of Babylon, the capital of one of the greatest empires in the ancient world. Descriptions of the gardens paint a picture of a lush, green oasis filled with exotic plants, flowers, and trees, cascading from towering terraces that rose high above the city. These terraces were supported by massive stone columns and arches, creating the impression that the gardens were hanging in midair. It is this image of a paradise suspended above the ground that has captured the imaginations of writers, historians, and explorers for centuries. The most commonly cited reason for the construction of the Hanging Gardens comes from a romantic legend involving King Nebuchadnezzar II, who ruled Babylon from 605 to 562 BCE. According to the story, Nebuchadnezzar built the gardens to please his wife, Amytis of Media, who longed for the green mountains and forests of her homeland. To ease her homesickness, Nebuchadnezzar is said to have created a magnificent garden filled with plants from distant lands, a tribute to her love and a symbol of his power. However, despite the vivid descriptions and the romantic legends surrounding the Hanging Gardens, no definitive archaeological evidence of their existence has ever been found. Babylon itself has been extensively excavated, and while researchers have uncovered the remains of Nebuchadnezzar's palace, the famed Ishtar Gate, and many other impressive structures, no conclusive remains of the Hanging Gardens have surfaced. This absence of physical evidence has led many historians to question whether the gardens ever existed at all. Ancient sources offer conflicting accounts of the Hanging Gardens, adding to the confusion. Herodotus, the Greek historian often referred to as the father of history, makes no mention of the gardens in his writings on Babylon. Instead, the earliest detailed descriptions come from Berossus, a Babylonian priest who wrote in the 3rd century BCE, and from later Greek historians such as Diodorus Siculus and Strabo, who wrote centuries after the supposed construction of the gardens. Diodorus described the Hanging Gardens as an engineering marvel, with towering terraces planted with a wide variety of trees and flowers, irrigated by an elaborate system of water channels. The gardens, according to these accounts, were not merely a place of beauty but a demonstration of the technological prowess of the Babylonians. To sustain the lush vegetation, water was drawn from the Euphrates River using a system of pumps and irrigation channels, an impressive feat of engineering given the technological limitations of the time. One of the most popular theories suggests that the Hanging Gardens were not located in Babylon at all, but rather in the Assyrian city of Nineveh, hundreds of miles to the north. This theory was proposed by Dr. Stephanie Dalley, a scholar of ancient Mesopotamia, who argues that the descriptions of the gardens more closely align with structures found in Nineveh during the reign of the Assyrian king Sennacherib. Dali points to inscriptions from Sennacherib's palace that describe a wonderful garden with terraces and irrigation systems, similar to the accounts of the Hanging Gardens attributed to Babylon. If Dali's theory is correct, it would explain why no evidence of the gardens has been found in Babylon itself. The confusion between the two cities may have arisen over time, as Greek and Roman historians writing centuries later could have mistakenly attributed the gardens to Babylon, given its fame as a great city. However, even if the Hanging Gardens were located in Nineveh rather than Babylon, their significance as a symbol of ancient engineering and luxury remains. The idea of a towering, lush garden sustained in the middle of a harsh desert landscape represents the pinnacle of what human ingenuity and ambition can achieve. The gardens were not just a tribute to nature, but also to the mastery of water, architecture, and design. In the absence of direct evidence, the Hanging Gardens continue to capture the imagination, not only because of their beauty but because they represent a timeless dream, the idea of creating a paradise on earth, a sanctuary of greenery amidst the arid wilderness. Ancient writers marveled at the ingenuity required to build and sustain such a garden, where water was scarce and the land unforgiving. The Hanging Gardens have become a metaphor for humankind's desire to conquer nature and turn even the most inhospitable environments into places of life and beauty. Despite the debates over their existence and location, the legend of the Hanging Gardens endures. Whether they were built by Nebuchadnezzar II for his queen in Babylon or by Sennacherib in Nineveh, the gardens remain one of the most iconic symbols of the ancient world. They remind us of a time when kings and rulers sought to leave their mark on history through monuments that would outlast their reigns, and when the power to manipulate nature was seen as a sign of divine favor. In the modern world, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon continue to inspire not only historians and archaeologists but also architects, designers, and artists who dream of recreating such magnificent spaces. Nebuchadnezzar II, the great builder of Babylon. Few rulers have left a legacy as monumental and lasting as Nebuchadnezzar II, who reigned over Babylon from 605 to 562 BCE. Under his leadership, Babylon transformed into the cultural and architectural jewel of the ancient world, marking the peak of the Neo-Babylonian Empire. His reign is remembered not only for his military prowess but also for his ambitious building projects that turned Babylon into one of the most magnificent cities in history. Nebuchadnezzar inherited the throne from his father, Nabopolassar, who had established the Neo-Babylonian Empire by overthrowing the Assyrians. Nebuchadnezzar's early reign was marked by military successes, most notably his victory over the Egyptians at the Battle of Carchemish in 605 BCE, which solidified Babylon's dominance across the ancient Near East. Yet, while his conquests expanded Babylon's borders, his most enduring legacy is found in the massive construction projects that made Babylon a city of legend. One of Nebuchadnezzar's most famous works was the rebuilding and expansion of Babylon's city walls, which ancient sources described as some of the most formidable defenses ever built. These walls, said to be wide enough to allow chariots to pass each other on top, were a symbol of Babylon's strength and security. At the heart of this fortified city stood the Ishtar Gate, an iconic structure adorned with blue glazed bricks and decorated with reliefs of lions, bulls, and dragons. The gate represented the gods Ishtar, Marduk, and Adad, emphasizing the city's divine protection and its king's devotion to the gods. Nebuchadnezzar's commitment to Babylon's grandeur extended to its religious buildings as well. He restored and expanded the Asagila, the temple dedicated to Marduk, the chief deity of Babylon. Adjacent to the temple was the ziggurat of Marduk, a towering structure that many believe inspired the biblical Tower of Babel. This massive ziggurat was a visual reminder of Babylon's connection to the divine and its importance as a religious center in the ancient world. Nebuchadnezzar's reign was not only about impressive monuments but also about the infrastructure that sustained the growing city. Babylon's location between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers made it a critical hub for trade and agriculture, and Nebuchadnezzar oversaw the development of advanced irrigation systems. These systems ensured that the city had a stable water supply, which supported its agriculture and helped Babylon flourish as a center of commerce and culture. Among the most famous legends associated with Nebuchadnezzar's reign is the creation of the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, considered one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. According to tradition, the gardens were built for Nebuchadnezzar's wife, Amytis of Media, who missed the lush, green landscapes of her homeland. The gardens were described as a breathtaking oasis of greenery in the heart of the arid desert, with terraces overflowing with trees, flowers, and vines. While the existence of the Hanging Gardens remains debated by historians, the story has become a symbol of Nebuchadnezzar's ambition to create beauty and paradise within his city. Nebuchadnezzar's reign also had significant political and cultural impacts beyond Babylon. In 587 BCE, he led the Babylonian army to conquer Jerusalem, destroying the first temple and exiling a large portion of the Jewish population to Babylon. This event, known as the Babylonian captivity, had profound effects on Jewish history, culture, and religious identity. The exile of the Jewish people became a central narrative in the Hebrew Bible, and Nebuchadnezzar is often depicted as a powerful yet complex figure in biblical texts. Despite the military campaigns and conquests, Nebuchadnezzar's legacy is most closely tied to his vision for Babylon as a city of unparalleled grandeur. His building projects, from the Ishtar Gate to the ziggurats and temples, were intended to reflect not only his power but also the divine favor that he believed protected his reign. He saw himself as the servant of the gods, especially Marduk, and much of his construction work was designed to glorify the gods and ensure Babylon's prosperity under their guidance. By the time of Nebuchadnezzar's death in 562 BCE, Babylon had reached the height of its power and splendor. It was the largest and wealthiest city in the world, its monumental architecture and advanced infrastructure making it the envy of neighboring kingdoms. However, Babylon's golden age was short-lived. Just a few decades after Nebuchadnezzar's death, the empire fell to Cyrus the Great of Persia in 539 BCE, bringing an end to Babylon's independence. Despite this, Nebuchadnezzar's contributions ensured that his name and the city he built would be remembered for millennia. Today, the ruins of Babylon still stand as a testament to Nebuchadnezzar's vision and achievements. Although much of the city has been lost to time, the remnants of its walls, gates, and temples continue to fascinate archaeologists and historians. Nebuchadnezzar II remains one of history's most remarkable rulers, not just for his military conquests but for his role as a builder who transformed Babylon into a symbol of human ambition and divine power. Babylon exile, the Babylonian captivity of the Israelites. One of the most significant and tumultuous events in the history of Babylon, and indeed in the history of the ancient world, was the Babylonian captivity of the Israelites. This episode, which occurred in the late 6th century BCE, shaped the religious, cultural, and historical identity of the Jewish people and left a lasting legacy in both biblical texts and broader history. Under the rule of Nebuchadnezzar II, Babylon played a central role in the exile and displacement of the people of Judah, marking the beginning of what is known as the Babylonian captivity. The Babylonian captivity has its roots in a period of instability in the kingdom of Judah, which had become a small and vulnerable state situated between powerful empires. For much of its existence, Judah found itself caught between the political ambitions of larger neighbors, particularly Egypt and Babylon. In 597 BCE, after a failed revolt against Babylonian rule, Jerusalem was besieged by the forces of Nebuchadnezzar II, and King Jehoiakim was deposed. Many members of the Judean royal family, as well as skilled workers and elites, were taken to Babylon as captives. However, this first deportation was only the beginning of a larger and more significant event. In 587 BCE, following a second rebellion against Babylonian authority, Nebuchadnezzar's army returned to Jerusalem, this time with devastating consequences. The Babylonians destroyed the city and its first temple, which had been the spiritual center of the Jewish people for centuries. The Temple of Solomon, considered one of the greatest religious structures of the ancient world, was reduced to rubble, and the heart of Jewish worship was shattered. Thousands of Jews were forcibly taken from their homeland and exiled to Babylon, an event that would deeply impact Jewish theology, identity, and history. The Babylonian captivity lasted for roughly 50 years, during which time the exiled Jewish population faced the challenge of maintaining their cultural and religious identity in a foreign land. Babylon, with its grand temples, ziggurats, and idols, presented a stark contrast to the monotheistic beliefs of the Israelites. The exile forced the Jewish community to grapple with profound questions about their relationship with their God, Yahweh, and the meaning of their suffering. Why had God allowed His chosen people to be defeated and exiled? Was the destruction of the temple a sign of divine abandonment or a punishment for the people's sins? During this period of exile, the Jewish community began to reshape their religious practices and beliefs. Without the temple, which had been the focal point of worship, the exiles turned to other forms of religious expression, including prayer, fasting, and the study of sacred texts. This period saw the development of synagogues as places of communal worship and the rise of scribes and prophets who played key roles in preserving and interpreting the Jewish faith. The exile also led to the compilation and redaction of many parts of the Hebrew Bible, particularly the writings of the prophets such as Jeremiah and Ezekiel, who addressed the themes of destruction, exile, and hope for restoration. Prophetic writings from this period reflect both despair and hope. The prophets interpreted the exile as a consequence of Judah's disobedience to God, particularly the worship of foreign idols and failure to uphold the covenant. Yet, alongside these messages of judgment, the prophets also conveyed a message of future redemption. They spoke of a day when the Jewish people would be allowed to return to their homeland, rebuild the temple, and restore their covenant with God. This dual message of punishment and hope became a central theme in Jewish thought and has echoed through Jewish history ever since. The turning point came in 539 BCE, when Babylon itself fell to the Persian Empire under the leadership of Cyrus the Great. Unlike the Babylonians, the Persians adopted a policy of tolerance toward the various peoples and religions within their empire. In 538 BCE, Cyrus issued a decree that allowed the exiled Jews to return to Judah and rebuild their temple. This event, known as the Edict of Cyrus, marked the end of the Babylonian captivity and the beginning of the Second Temple period. The Jews who returned to Jerusalem began the difficult process of rebuilding their city and their religious life, culminating in the construction of the Second Temple. However, not all Jews returned to Judah. Many chose to remain in Babylon, where they had established thriving communities during the exile. These Jewish communities in Babylon would continue to flourish for centuries, becoming centers of Jewish scholarship and culture. The Babylonian Talmud, one of the central texts of Rabbinic Judaism, would later be compiled in this region, demonstrating the lasting impact of the Jewish presence in Babylon. The Babylonian captivity had a profound effect on Jewish identity, religion, and history. The experience of exile deepened the Jewish understanding of their covenant with God, reinforcing themes of faith, repentance, and redemption. The destruction of the First Temple and the subsequent exile became defining moments in Jewish theology, symbolizing both the consequences of sin and the enduring hope for divine restoration. The prophetic visions of return and rebuilding influenced Jewish eschatology, as well as the broader cultural memory of exile, which continues to resonate in Jewish thought to this day. The Babylonian captivity also left an indelible mark on the biblical narrative. Many of the stories, laws, and teachings that form the foundation of the Hebrew Bible were either written or shaped during the period of exile. The stories of exile and return, of faithfulness in the face of adversity, became central to the Jewish understanding of their identity as a people chosen by God, tested by suffering, and ultimately restored through His mercy. Babylon's role in trade and economy, gateway of the ancient world. At its height, Babylon was more than just a city of architectural splendor and military might. It was a vital economic hub in the ancient world. Nestled between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers in what is today modern Iraq, Babylon was strategically located at the crossroads of several major trade routes that connected the Persian Gulf, Mesopotamia, and beyond. As a result, it became a focal point for trade, commerce, and culture, acting as a gateway between the East and West and helping to facilitate the exchange of goods, ideas, and innovations across vast distances. The geographical position of Babylon was one of its greatest advantages. The city was situated along the banks of the Euphrates River, which provided it with fertile land for agriculture and a reliable source of water for irrigation. This allowed Babylon to sustain a large population, with agriculture forming the backbone of its economy. The abundance of crops like barley, dates, and wheat was not only used to feed the city's inhabitants but was also traded with neighboring regions. In addition to agriculture, Babylon had access to valuable natural resources such as clay for pottery and bricks, which were used to build the city's impressive structures. Beyond its agricultural wealth, Babylon's real economic strength lay in its role as a trading center. The city was a hub for merchants from across the ancient world, including regions as far-flung as Egypt, India, and the Mediterranean. Caravans loaded with goods traveled along the Royal Road, a major trade route that linked the Persian Empire to Anatolia, passing through Babylon along the way. The city's central location made it a key stopping point for traders moving goods between Asia, the Middle East, and the Mediterranean. These trade routes brought a diverse range of commodities into Babylon, including spices, precious metals, textiles, and luxury goods, turning the city into a vibrant marketplace. Babylon was also a center for the exchange of cultural ideas and technologies, with merchants, scholars, and travelers from distant lands contributing to the city's cosmopolitan character. The interaction between different cultures facilitated the spread of innovations in mathematics, astronomy, and engineering, many of which were either developed or refined in Babylon. The famous Babylonian numeral system and advances in astronomy were, in part, the result of this cultural exchange, highlighting Babylon's role as a crossroads of knowledge as well as trade. In addition to being a marketplace for goods, Babylon was home to a sophisticated financial system that played a key role in managing its economy. The Babylonians were pioneers in the development of contracts and loans, and many of the legal innovations attributed to Hammurabi's code involved regulating trade and commerce. These laws provided protections for merchants and ensured that trade disputes could be settled in a fair and transparent manner. Contracts were often inscribed on clay tablets, which outlined the terms of business agreements, loans, or purchases. This system helped to formalize trade and contributed to the city's reputation as a place where commerce could thrive. Babylon's currency system also facilitated trade. The Babylonians used silver as a form of currency measured by weight, which allowed for the standardization of transactions. Merchants and traders from across the region could easily exchange goods using silver, and the city became a center for banking and financial services. Babylonian banks extended loans, collected interest, and even offered forms of investment, making the city an early pioneer of complex financial systems that would later influence economies across the ancient world. One of the most significant aspects of Babylon's economy was its role in the luxury trade. Babylon was famous for its wealth, and its rulers and elites were patrons of fine goods. Items such as intricately woven textiles, precious stones, and exotic spices were highly prized in the royal courts and temples of Babylon. These luxury goods were often imported from far-off lands, such as India or Egypt, and were a visible marker of the city's affluence and global connections. The city's religious festivals also played a part in its economic life. Babylon was a center of religious activity, particularly the worship of Marduk, the city's patron deity. Major religious festivals, such as the New Year festival, drew visitors from across the empire, boosting trade and commerce during these celebrations. Pilgrims and travelers who came to Babylon for religious reasons often participated in the city's bustling markets, further stimulating the local economy. In addition to its role as a commercial hub, Babylon was also a center of taxation and tribute. As the capital of the Neo-Babylonian Empire, Babylon collected taxes and tribute from its vast territories. These revenues were used to fund the city's monumental building projects, including the Ishtar Gate, palaces, and ziggurats. The wealth that flowed into Babylon from across the empire helped to maintain its status as the most prosperous city of its time. However, Babylon's wealth and economic power also made it a target for conquest. After the death of Nebuchadnezzar II, Babylon's fortunes began to decline, and in 539 BCE, the city fell to the Persian Empire under Cyrus the Great. Despite the change in rulers, Babylon remained an important center of trade under Persian rule. The city continued to play a crucial role in the Persian economy, serving as a key administrative and commercial center within the empire. Babylon's position as a gateway between the East and West, its role in fostering trade, and its innovations in commerce and finance made it one of the most important cities of the ancient world. Its influence extended far beyond its own borders, helping to shape the economies of the wider region. The fall of Babylon, Cyrus the Great, and the Persian conquest. The fall of Babylon in 539 BCE marks one of the most significant moments in ancient history. After centuries of prosperity, wealth, and influence, the mighty Babylonian Empire fell to the Persians, led by Cyrus the Great, marking the end of Babylon's golden age and the beginning of a new era under Persian rule. This dramatic event reshaped the political landscape of the ancient Near East and signaled the rise of the Achaemenid Empire, one of the largest and most powerful empires in the ancient world. The Neo-Babylonian Empire, which had reached its zenith under the reign of Nebuchadnezzar II, began to weaken after his death in 562 BCE. The rulers who followed Nebuchadnezzar struggled to maintain the same level of control and stability, leading to political unrest and economic decline. During this time, Babylon's internal divisions made it more vulnerable to outside threats, and a new power was rising in the east, the Persian Empire, under the leadership of Cyrus the Great. Cyrus had already established himself as a formidable military leader by uniting the Persian tribes and conquering the powerful Median Empire. After securing his position in Persia, Cyrus turned his attention westward, seeking to expand his empire into Mesopotamia. Babylon, the jewel of the region, was the ultimate prize, and its capture would solidify Persian dominance. In 539 BCE, Cyrus launched his campaign against Babylon. Despite its formidable defenses, Babylon was not as invulnerable as it once had been. The city's king at the time, Nabonidus, had become increasingly unpopular among the Babylonian priesthood and the general population. His long absences from Babylon and his focus on religious reforms had alienated many of his subjects, weakening the unity of the city. This discontent within Babylon made it easier for Cyrus to gain support from certain factions within the empire. One of the most remarkable aspects of the Persian conquest of Babylon was the relatively peaceful nature of the city's fall. According to the Cyrus Cylinder, an ancient document often referred to as the First Declaration of Human Rights, Cyrus claimed that the city was taken without significant bloodshed. The Cylinder describes how Cyrus entered Babylon as a liberator rather than a conqueror, welcomed by the city's inhabitants. This peaceful takeover was likely facilitated by widespread dissatisfaction with Nabonidus and the promise of stability under Persian rule. Cyrus portrayed himself as a protector of Babylonian traditions and religious practices, which helped legitimize his rule. Unlike other conquerors, Cyrus did not destroy Babylon's temples or impose his own religion on the people. Instead, he respected the local customs and deities, particularly the worship of Marduk, the chief god of Babylon. By presenting himself as a benevolent ruler who respected the city's traditions, Cyrus was able to win the loyalty of the Babylonian elites and the priesthood. One of the most significant actions taken by Cyrus after his conquest of Babylon was the issuing of the Edict of Cyrus, which allowed exiled peoples, including the Jews, to return to their homelands. This decree, which is referenced in the Hebrew Bible, marked the end of the Babylonian captivity for the Jewish people and allowed them to return to Jerusalem to rebuild their temple. Cyrus's policy of religious tolerance and his willingness to restore displaced peoples to their lands earned him a reputation as a just and magnanimous ruler, both in Babylon and in other regions under his control. The peaceful transition of power and Cyrus's policies of tolerance ensured that Babylon continued to thrive as a major cultural and economic center under Persian rule. Although the Neo-Babylonian Empire had come to an end, the city itself remained an important hub for trade, administration, and religious activity within the Achaemenid Empire. Babylon's strategic location and its well-established infrastructure made it a valuable asset to the Persian kings, who used the city as one of their key administrative capitals. Cyrus's conquest of Babylon was not just a military victory, it was a symbolic moment that signaled a new era of imperial governance. The Achaemenid Empire, under Cyrus and his successors, would go on to become one of the largest empires the world had ever seen, stretching from Egypt to India. The fall of Babylon was a turning point in ancient history, marking the end of one great empire and the rise of another, even greater in size and influence. Although Babylon remained an important city under Persian rule, it never regained the same level of independence and prominence that it had enjoyed under the reign of Nebuchadnezzar II and the earlier Babylonian kings. Over time, the city's influence waned as new centers of power emerged within the Persian Empire, particularly Persepolis, the ceremonial capital of the Achaemenids. Despite this decline, Babylon's cultural and historical legacy continued to resonate throughout the ancient world. In the centuries that followed, Babylon would change hands several times, falling under the control of Alexander the Great in 331 BCE after his defeat of the Persian Empire. Alexander admired Babylon's grandeur and chose to make it one of his key capitals, further cementing the city's place in history. However, following Alexander's death, Babylon's fortunes declined further, and the once great city eventually fell into obscurity. Today, the fall of Babylon to Cyrus the Great remains a pivotal event in world history. It marked the end of the Neo-Babylonian Empire and the beginning of Persian dominance in the ancient Near East. The city, which had once stood as a symbol of power and wealth, became a province of a much larger empire. Despite this, Babylon's legacy as a center of culture, learning, and architectural wonder endures, and its story continues to captivate historians and archaeologists alike. The legacy of Babylon: influence on later civilizations. Though the Empire of Babylon fell more than 2 millennia ago, its legacy has echoed throughout history, leaving an indelible mark on later civilizations in realms as diverse as law, architecture, science, and culture. As one of the most influential centers of the ancient world, Babylon's contributions to human progress are still felt today, long after its physical monuments have crumbled and its empire faded into history. One of the most enduring aspects of Babylon's legacy is its contribution to the development of law and governance. Hammurabi's Code, one of the earliest and most complete written legal codes, set a precedent for future civilizations and the creation of structured, state-enforced laws. Written around 1754 BCE, Hammurabi's Code established the principle that the king was responsible for ensuring justice and protecting the weak, including widows, orphans, and the poor. Many of the concepts found in Hammurabi's Code, such as the notion of proportional justice, an eye for an eye, influenced legal systems across the ancient Near East and beyond. Hammurabi's emphasis on written laws created a model for future empires, which would use legal codification as a means of governance and control. Babylon also had a profound impact on architecture and urban planning. The city itself was a marvel of the ancient world, known for its towering ziggurats, monumental gates, and complex infrastructure. The construction of massive structures like the Ishtar Gate and the Ziggurat of Marduk left a lasting impression on later cultures, particularly in terms of religious architecture. The concept of a ziggurat, a stepped pyramid designed as a link between heaven and earth, inspired later monumental architecture, including the pyramids of Mesoamerica. Babylonian urban planning, with its walled city layout and impressive water management systems, became a model for cities across the ancient Near East. The city's grand scale and aesthetic beauty influenced the design of later capitals, including Persepolis under the Achaemenid Empire and Alexandria under Alexander the Great. In the realm of science and mathematics, Babylon made significant advancements, many of which laid the foundation for later scientific thought. Babylonian scholars were renowned for their work in astronomy and mathematics. They developed a sexagesimal system, a base 60 system of counting, that is still used today to measure time, with 60 seconds in a minute and 60 minutes in an hour, and angles, with 360 degrees in a circle. Babylonian astronomers meticulously observed the movements of the stars and planets, creating detailed star charts and predicting astronomical events like lunar eclipses. This knowledge was passed on to later civilizations, including the Greeks and Romans, and helped form the basis of modern astronomy. In terms of literature and mythology, Babylon's influence is equally profound. The Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the world's oldest literary works, was composed in Mesopotamia and preserved in the libraries of Babylon. This epic, which tells the story of a legendary king's quest for immortality, has influenced countless works of literature throughout history, from Homer's epics to modern storytelling. The themes of heroism, mortality, and the search for meaning that are present in the Epic of Gilgamesh continue to resonate in literary traditions worldwide. Additionally, Babylonian myths and religious beliefs, particularly those concerning creation and the gods, played a role in shaping the religious narratives of later civilizations. Some scholars suggest that Babylonian creation myths, like the Enuma Elish, influenced the development of biblical creation stories found in Genesis. The legacy of Babylonian religious practices is also evident in the religious traditions of later cultures. Babylon was a deeply spiritual city, with Marduk as its chief god, and its religious festivals, particularly the New Year festival, were grand and highly ritualistic. The structure of Babylonian temples, with their ziggurats serving as sacred mountains, influenced temple designs in other regions. The concept of a sacred center, where gods and humans could connect, was integral to Babylonian religious life and became a model for future religious architecture and cosmology in cultures across the Near East and beyond. Politically, the administrative systems of Babylon influenced the structure of future empires. The use of provincial governors, the codification of laws, and the collection of taxes were all practices that were adopted by the empires that succeeded Babylon, including the Persian Empire. Even Alexander the Great, who conquered Babylon in 331 BCE, was fascinated by the city's grandeur and chose to make it one of his administrative capitals. After his death, Babylon continued to play an important role in the political and cultural landscape of the ancient world, even as it gradually declined in prominence. Perhaps one of the most significant legacies of Babylon is its symbolic role in Western culture and religion. In the Bible, Babylon became synonymous with decadence, sin, and eventual downfall. The story of the Tower of Babel is one of the most famous biblical tales, symbolizing human arrogance and the divine intervention that led to the scattering of peoples and the confusion of languages. Babylon is also mentioned in the Book of Revelation as the archetype of a corrupt and fallen empire, a symbol that has continued to resonate throughout Christian thought. Over time, Babylon came to represent not just the historical city, but the idea of imperial hubris and moral decay, making it a powerful symbol in both religious and secular contexts. In modern times, the ruins of Babylon still capture the imagination of archaeologists, historians, and tourists. Excavations have uncovered the foundations of Nebuchadnezzar's grand palaces, the remains of the Ishtar Gate, and portions of the city's famous walls. As we come to the end of our whispered journey through the lost cities of the world, from the mythical Atlantis to the hidden treasures of El Dorado, we are reminded of the mysteries that still captivate our imaginations. These ancient cities, some rooted in reality and others shrouded in legend, have shaped the way we think about the past, inspiring explorers and dreamers for centuries. Thank you for joining me on this exploration of forgotten worlds and the fascinating stories they hold. If you enjoyed this journey, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss future adventures. I look forward to whispering more tales of history, mystery, and wonder with you soon. Until then, may your dreams be filled with the lost wonders of the ancient world. Good night.